everybody. So welcome to the last talk of the day. I'm very delighted to be here today. And I'll talk about A/B testing for the next 30 minutes. And I'll especially focus on how you can, if you're not already doing it, how you can create winning A/B tests. And at the same time, how you can do that within a reasonable amount of effort and work from your side. I've worked with A/B testing for almost 10 years now with my own company, and I've got to work with quite a few developers, and their to-do lists and project lists are very amazing. So it's important for us that they can manage the A/B tests within their to-do list. I'll start with a very small, a little story. We wrote a blog post some time back, and it talks about 3 things that impact conversion rate optimization work. So we wrote that article 2 years ago. We had been about 8 years with our own company at that time, and we had had quite a few successful optimization projects at that time. And we started to think about, okay, what makes up a successful conversion project? And we found that there were 3 things that we found to be decisive to make everything successful. One of those things, I'll talk about all 3 things during the talk, but one of those things was the number of tests. Yeah, so what we are preaching is, test as much as you can, test as much as your conversions and your traffic allow to test. And we got a comment a couple of years ago, so this article is 2 years old. We got an email actually from a reader, which is nothing unusual, but we thought that the email or her description of her situation was super exciting and eye-opening to us in terms of, test all you can. And I have translated the email, so she's a German-speaking person, and I've translated it into English as good as I could. And I'll show you that email because we thought it was super eye-opening, and it probably describes more the situation for you and for other people doing A/B testing than what we would like it to be or what we thought the situation would be. So what she wrote was, I'll read it loud. So the second paragraph, she wrote, "I agree that you should run more A/B tests." So that's one of the factors we wrote about. But sometimes A/B testing gets out of control. It happens when it is misused to solve disputes about what is right and what is wrong. Yeah, so she was doing it right in the terms of this company, in terms of testing as much as they could, but still she thought, okay, we are not on track. And we mentioned this, of these 3 factors, we mentioned this as the first factor. And the problem with this company was, in her eyes, that they were not doing the 2 other factors that we think are important. And you can see that here, so I'll continue reading. So what she's saying is, a mentality of if we can't agree, then let's test it, means that loads of resources are wasted on deciding, coding, and setting up tests that focus on micro topics, rather than testing things we might think are right for users and testing on pages where we expect the biggest revenue uplifts. That was eye-opening to us because we only do A/B tests, and we've been preaching for 10 years now almost, that it's important to set up a testing culture in companies. It's important to have a systematic approach rather than randomly testing, and even in this case, misusing A/B testing to kind of as a decision maker for things you can't agree on. Okay, so we thought, maybe most people, maybe you, maybe other people who do A/B testing feel like this. Maybe you feel like this if you are asked by other people to run A/B tests. When you get, I'm not saying that testing color doesn't make sense. It might make sense and might be a good test, but just to simplify things, if you get all these test ideas thrown onto your desk and you think, oh, when should I do that? That's a simple one, but there are also complexer tests, of course, and you might not even believe in the test, and you'll have to implement it. So what the goal is when we do A/B testing is to get that variation up and running against the control. And ideally, because we spend time and money on it, we want it to win. As said, there's resources flowing into the variation, so that starts with generating the idea, doing the wireframes, turning the wireframe into a design, copywriting, and then doing the coding and maybe quality assurance before it can go live. So what I want to talk to you about today is those 3 factors that we think are so decisive. And first of all, 3 questions that you should ask yourself or your team when you do a B test, because we think that will save you both time and money and increase productivity on any CRO project. Okay, so back again to the article. As said, we mentioned 3 factors that we have experienced on our own projects are decisive to make it a successful conversion rate project. So the first factor is that you'll have to think about how can I increase the average uplift per test? Yeah, so how can I get the most out of every test I send live? The second one is similar to the first one. Yeah, it's how can I get a win at all? Yeah, there are too many tests that end up inconclusive or lose. Yeah, but I think the inconclusive ones are almost the most frustrating ones. And we also experience that a lot of teams come to us and say, we've ran a lot of A/B tests here, but we only get inconclusive results. What should we do? And then the third one is, I said, the number of tests. Yeah, so test as much as you can, as long as it's not random. And that's getting back to the 2 first factors that they kind of didn't do well in that company when we talk about the email. And what we've seen is, so if you want to increase the uplift of the test, and if you want to make sure that as many of your tests that you put live are winning, then you should get into the mind of your users. It's so tempting still. Yeah? There are so many blog posts out there, and it's so tempting when you're under pressure just to take something you like on another site or read a blog post where something worked, yeah, and then try that out on your page in an A/B test. Yeah, it might work, but what we've seen is if you get into the mind of your users, if you address the objections of your users, then you have much bigger chances of getting great uplifts. So my first tip is ask yourself if you're doing the A/B test yourself, or ask your teammates if they are doing them or you're doing them in cooperation with them. Do we have the user insights that make us believe in this test? So did we do the homework or the groundwork that forms the basis of an A/B test? Do we understand the users? Do we understand what their concerns are? With this test idea, are we addressing those concerns? And what we do is it's a super simple exercise, and by now we call it the research coin, to make sure that we have all the research insights before we start working on test ideas. So on the one side of the testing coin, we look at what do people do or what do users not do, what we want them to do. And at the other side of that coin, we seek to get answers to why are they not doing things that we want them to do, or why are they doing certain things that we think are interesting. And when we have that, and when we talk about user research, most people are like, oh, that's so academic, and it sounds to be a lot of work and take a long time. And most people, and we are, including we ourselves, are action-oriented, so we want to get the first test up and running soon. But it's not. Yeah. So what we do is we combine different tools. So that can be on the behavioral side, we look at the analytics. Then we like running heat maps, look at some session recordings, click maps, and scroll maps. And on the other side of the coin, the why side, so the thought side, I think that's the thing that's less known in terms of using it for conversion rate optimization, is we look at if the company has some user conversations saved somewhere in the database, so that can be chat transcript, it can be email conversations with the CS team, then we ask for those files, and they mostly think we're crazy, yeah? But we read through all those conversations, and usually we find quite a few good things in there in terms of insights that we can address in our A/B tests. We might also set up a couple of surveys. So it's pretty fast and easy to get get into the mind of the user with a couple of small exercises. This is an example from a website that offers personal life guidance. So if you have problems in your love life, or if you have problems with your career, financial problems, they offer readings that are targeted at your specific problem. And they have a free version, or free reports, that you can get access to if you register. And then they have a subscribed area where you get exclusive access to reports and readings if you're ready to pay for it. And this client asked us to work on increasing the conversions for the paid subscriptions. So we did some user research, and we found two things. Yeah? And I must say the first point is by far was the most important. Yeah? So it was, I can't afford it right now. So many of these people were in a tight financial situation. That's also why they were seeking advice. Yeah? So they couldn't afford the paid subscription. And then the second one, but it was by far the second one, that was people saying, the free material, I get so good advice from that I don't really need to pay for more. What we did is we dismissed the first one when we were on the project. Yeah, so we learned from that mistake, as you'll see in a second. And we started working on the second point. And what happened was that we wasted quite a lot of time, yeah, because we said, okay, that's an easy one. Yeah? If they don't understand the benefits of a paid account and the additional resources you can get there, then we'll simply code a page where we'll focus on all the nice things you get when you have the subscribed account. And we focused on those things because we talked to people who had the subscription. They told us what they liked particularly. And they said, I liked certain exclusive readings. I liked the daily readings. You wouldn't get access to those if you were not a paid member. And there was a free course that they particularly liked. Yeah. So we said, okay, we'll focus on that. We did the wireframe. The client did the design and the coding. And yeah, there was quite a lot of time wasted on that one because that sometimes happened. And in this case, it was inconclusive. Yeah. And since the user research was it was not the biggest objection, but still there were quite a few saying that they didn't see the benefits in the paid subscription. We were quite surprised about that. So what you should do in such a case, you can do it yourself. I think you should challenge either yourself or you should challenge those who have suggested the test to go back again to the user research. And we did so too. So we looked into the first one again that we dismissed because we thought, okay, we'll not reduce or suggest to reduce prices, and there were no any other immediate ideas for optimization. So what we did is we went through all the statements again from surveys we had received, and I'm just having one here, yeah, but there were many of these statements, yeah, and we had focused on, I don't have the money, I can't afford it, I haven't got the money right now, yeah, so that was why we called this group of objections, I can't afford it, yeah. What we had totally overseen was that not all of them, but many of those statements had a second statement in them, but I do want to thank you. Yeah, and so we thought, okay, they might be financially challenged, but again, there might be some of them who can afford to pay for the subscription. So what we did is we did a super tiny change, and it was also, when we read it through, it was also like, what is trying to understand the context of the user who was on this site. Yeah, and the original call to action was the typical subscribe now on the page where you would subscribe for the paid account. And what we did is we say, okay, these people are so pleased and so happy that they get help from the free content and free reports that they will be willing to donate. They are ready to give something back. So we didn't change anything else. We didn't change the subscription model, and we just changed the text on the button to donate from subscribe now. And we got a 214 Uplift in paid subscription. This is not usual, but I like this because it shows you if you hit the pain point exactly with what you're testing, then you can get amazing uplifts, and you have almost no work except from the user research that you have to read through carefully. Okay, so this is just kind of comparing the two things. So we spent almost 10 hours with the page because it went back and forth, of course, and we were discussing how to best sell the benefits of the additional resources. And the donate button, of course, took hardly any time to implement. Okay, so the second, or the last factor, so to say, number of tests. I'll give you 2 tips for that. So you kind of, if I go back to the email, you need to get the first 2 factors right. So you need to think about, am I working on the right test idea? So with the test idea, am I addressing the concerns of users? If you've got that right, then you can focus on getting the number of tests, increasing the number of tests. And here I have two things. One thing is, so if you've done a test, so if you've got the first 2 things right, you run a test, it's successful. So now you've got confirmation for that test and the hypothesis that you might have built, that the direction is right. So users say, okay, I like this, and more users will convert, and we will be persuaded by the new winning variation. And what we like doing is asking ourselves, so can we make that winning variation even stronger by making another iteration of that win? And that's a very simple diagram showing what happens in real life. So you have the first page that's a control with a certain conversion rate. Then you do the first winning page and have an uplift. And then you very quickly, because now you know page B is winning, so you know my hypothesis and the direction is right because the users have confirmed that in my A/B test, then you'll quite quickly try and do a better version of version B, and that's the iterative cycle you'll get into, and you can continue that forever. We worked on a shopping site some time back to increase conversions for the Tell a Friend program. They had different options for their customers to recommend the site to families and friends. And we thought, when we started with that project, there were no tracking on those links or anything, and the client and we thought that the social sharing options would be those that we would be working on for the next 6 months. But it wasn't. We were super surprised, all of us, when we did the user research, and customers told us. So I'm going back again. So what we did was we read through all the emails that we could get hold of and all the personal messages in this box. We read through those, and what we found out was that then people would go to a barbecue at night, go to a family reunion, they would talk to their family and friends about this site, and they would say that they were so happy about it, and then they would go to the website afterwards, and they would send the link, or they would write an email or a message to their family or their friends to do the recommendation and get their thank you bonus for recommending. So it was super personal. It was not about posting it on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever. They were personal emails, and they were also the 2 biggest channels for recommending friends. So what we did is we took the email, and then we said, okay, it looked like that when we started. So there was a standard email header, and it said hello. It was very neutral and had kind of the typical things that an email has nowadays. So it was it had different images, like the social share icons. It had a logo, and it said, hello, you're receiving this email because your friend Lotte wants to recommend your website to us. And it was sent from the website. And what we did is, with the test, that was super simple. We said, you have a message from Lotte, so we made it more relevant and more personal, like it was coming from the friend and not from the website. I want to recommend a new website to you that I like using. And then if you have questions, let me know, best Lotte. That was the first email we sent out and tested. And we had a plus of 14% in registration from that email, so people registering after they'd been recommended the page. Okay, so now we took the winning variation and used that as basis for a new test, because we said, okay, this email, obviously it works when we make the email more personal, yeah? But we can still strengthen that because we have the standard email header, we have the logo, we have the social share icons that you would never have in a personal email. So we simply took those away, yeah, and it looked like this, more or less, yeah. And we had another 5% uplift from that, yeah. So ask yourself, when you do have a winning variation, can you further strengthen that in the same direction? So it goes up like this, and with relatively little effort, you can make these changes. That applies to websites, to apps, to wherever you can test. Then the last tip that I have for you today is, can we come up with a simple solution to address user objections? So what we do when we write blog posts and when we present, we write about our projects. And most people say, but that's obvious what you're doing, and they are not, complicated things to do. Yeah? And I think that's where the magic lies. Yeah? So if there are obvious things that you think might be complex to kind of get at, yeah, try to think of a simple solution, or try to challenge those people coming up with the A/B tests. Isn't there a simpler solution? And I'll give you one example from that I really like. We were working on an online gaming website for some years, and they wanted us to increase conversions to new registrations. And I think there was no surprise in the user research, because it was a big site, so it had a lot of members and a lot of traffic, but it was not well known. Yeah, so people kind of didn't trust it. So what we started to do when we had the user research insights, I started to work with the team. I think one obvious idea was to work on, they didn't have trust seals, so we thought about trying to look at, or we did look at different trust seals that are relevant in the gaming world. And we looked into what they needed to fulfill to get those trust seals. Yeah? So you can imagine that was quite a time-consuming project. What we also looked into was, can we get an opinion leader, so someone who's trusted, who wants to kind of be on the website or be an element on the website, and due to the bare fact that this person who's trusted, that we used this person on the website, it was not this guy, yeah, it was another guy. Can it produce more trust when people visit the website? Yeah? And we had an opinion leader, we had a great opinion leader, but it also turned out to be very complicated, because just getting to the contract phase with that guy was a super complicated thing. So what we did, we didn't throw these ideas away, and we continued to work on those more complex ideas. And in the meantime, we said, okay, let's not waste time, let's do something. Yeah? Let's think of super simple ideas we can test while we work on the more complex ideas. So what we did is, in the header, there was a free space. Yeah? So there was nothing there at that time, so we did a site-wide test, and we placed a banner there. So originally there was no banner. And in the variation, we created a banner, and it said, every 8th household enjoys playing with us. Yeah? So there were a lot of members, yeah, but nobody knew the site. A lot of people who were on the page didn't know about the site, despite the fact that there were a lot of people playing actually on the website. And we kind of tried to put it in perspective by using the household thing, yeah. And that worked really well. So we had a 17% in uplift in registration on that one. And then what we did was, on that one, we iterated as well. Yeah, on this super simple idea, we said, okay, that seems to work. So we tried a new one. We actually had a lot of tests running in that direction. Yeah, and we said, okay, let's take a city This is not the real city because I can't tell you which site we're working on. Yeah, so this is just the imaginary city. So it was Frankfurt, but we took a city back then that was a city that people also would connect with some kind of trust. Yeah, so a serious city. And we said, okay, we have more players than all of Frankfurt. That's more than 750,000. And with that, we had an additional 9% in registrations. So try to think, challenge your team that they should come up with. I'm not saying that you shouldn't work on the complex ones because they might give you bigger uplifts. Yeah, they might not. Yeah, but you should also try out those. But spend the time wisely while you're working on those complex ones and get some super simple tests up and running. Okay, and I don't know how much time I've left. 4 minutes, that's perfect, yes, because I'm at the end now, yeah. So still, although we got that email saying that, oh, we're testing so much, but we are not on track, yeah, we still think that you should test as much as you can, but don't test for the sake of testing. Don't just do random tests. Test, yeah, but do it, have it backed by solid user research data, and it's easy to get. And what we do is we try to test as much as we can, and we have found 3 things that give us good opportunities to test as much as we can. So what we do is, that's related to the last example I showed you. We switch between low-effort tests and complex tests. Yeah? So we have a roadmap, and we work on the complex test in the near future. And while we do that, we run the low-effort tests that are simple text changes very often to get some first wins. And the nice thing about that is also you get to test with the lower effort test, you get to test out different directions, and you can get an evidence which kind of idea or what direction works for the user in terms of addressing their concerns and their objections. Usually websites have different conversion funnels, yeah, so they tend to come to us and say, okay, we want you to focus on increasing conversions for that funnel. But when we're into the project, we usually also test in other conversion funnels. So it might be like the website with the personal advice thing. We tested conversion also from visitors to registrations. We tested, as I said, the upgrade from a free account to a paid account. But we also tested they offered different courses that you could enroll to that were paid, where you would have to pay additionally. We tested those funnels too. So usually there are many funnels that you can test in, so you don't have to wait for one test to end before you can test again. There are many opportunities there. Then a last thing is, so clients tend to test with all segments at one. Yeah, I think it provides also, it gives you the opportunity to set up more tests because you can test in separated segments. So for example, existing visitors versus new visitors. But it also gives you insights when you start breaking down your visitors to segments. It gives you insights whether certain things work for certain segments. So I think that's a very interesting way to go in terms of testing more. And if you have more domains, many of our clients have several domains. We start with one domain to get started fast testing, but then we roll out tests to the other domains too, and that gives us the full potential of testing when we do that. And I think test, it keeps, from what we've experienced with our projects is it keeps up the spirit. If you keep testing, then you have a positive spirit in terms of going on, and there will be a lot of wins that keeps up the spirit. So I want to end my presentation by saying to you, never start a test if you didn't ask these 3 questions. And I think there's no Q&A session, but if you do have questions, please feel free and come up.
We will do it.
Okay.
We'll do it. We're going to do it. Here
Thank
I am.
you.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right, we've got time for a few questions. I would like to welcome also to the stage Lotte's colleague Nina. She's going to assist with some of these questions. Now, the top 2 questions are both to do with tools, right? So what tools are used to implement A/B tests on websites, apps, emails, and so on?
Yeah, so what we usually work with what the client has, basically. Yeah, but if the client doesn't have an A/B testing tool, we usually recommend Visual Website Optimizer. We like that because it provides good value and it's not too expensive. And if you need support, I would say they are quite supportive. Their customer service team in helping you on the technical details. So we like that. For bigger clients, we sometimes suggest Optimizely, but they have a new business model, so they've become quite expensive nowadays. But I think Visual Website Optimizer, it's a good tool. You get you get helpful tips and advice from the customer service team. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And sorry, can I just, because we wanted that slide in there, but there wasn't space for it, yeah? But most of those tools, so that's also something where you can challenge your teams if you want to get rid of some of the A/B tests on your table. The simple tests can be done by people with no technical skills at all. So there are editors in most testing tools today where you can do very simple tests yourself without any technical expertise. What you see is what you get, editors.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question here. Do you have any examples where the A/B test data clearly contradicted the user research you did beforehand, and why do you think this happened?
Contradicted, I think what's interesting is we have clients that operate in different continents or countries. And for example, what happened that in user research we found out that trust was a topic at a client. And when we did our split tests, we always did them separately for the different countries. And it was very interesting to see, for example, that in adding a trust seal in South America, it helped us with the conversions a lot. In North America, it didn't matter because they had, so when we looked at the user research in total, you know, it kind of contradicted then later for the American market, but by splitting it out, the testing, we realized that it was only true for part of the market, for example. So that's also a tip. When you have different countries, not everything, you know, can be transferred. Usually it's a good idea when something works somewhere to test it also in the other one, but it's not a given that it's like that. And we had a lot of tests with different clients, for example, very similar tests, but they didn't have the same results because the users are so unique to the site. So yeah, depending on the site and the region, it can be very different.
All right. And let's just do one last one now. How do you deal with conversion rate optimization on pages with low traffic?
Yeah, that's difficult. It depends. It depends always also on the ratio of traffic and conversions. So it's not always easy to, you know, exactly predict how well it works. But on low, so either the tests have to run very long time, or we help ourselves with other things that are not as good as, you know, split testing. So you have, you know, we work more with user research, and then we do changes, and then we reconfirm what happens, or, you know, things like that. But yeah, there's low traffic pages. It's harder. It's important. So what you can do is there's usually certain. So for example, tests on home pages tend to get harder. It's harder to get results because you're further away from the end of the funnel. So, for example, if you test closer to the end of the funnel, it's easier to get test results. So when you have lower traffic sites, then you should be very clever in where you test and what you test, and also test more boldly. You know, not the tiny tests, but really, you know, make bold tests to get results.
Okay. Thank you. A big hand for Lotte and Nina.